Ilara moved quietly through the misty forest, her boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. The trees were ancient and tall, their twisted branches forming a dark canopy that blocked the first rays of dawn. A strange silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant cry of birds and the occasional rustle of leaves. She had entered the forest many times before, gathering herbs and roots for her small village. But today felt different. The fog seemed thicker, almost alive, and the wind carried whispers she could not understand. As she knelt near a patch of wildflowers, a faint, pitiful whine reached her ears. She froze, straining to listen. It came again, a sound of fear and pain. Following the sound carefully, she stepped over roots and rocks until she stumbled upon the source. 2 small wolf pups, their fur matted with blood and dirt, trapped in cruel metal snares. Their eyes, wide and terrified, met hers, and a pang of sorrow struck her heart. Without hesitation, Ilara dropped to her knees and examined the traps. "It's okay. I'm going to help you," she whispered softly. She worked quickly but gently, loosening the twisted metal with a small knife. One pup yelped in fear, the other whimpered, but she kept speaking softly, her voice steady, soothing. Finally, with a small snap, both traps gave way, and the pups stumbled free. Ilara scooped them into her arms, feeling their small bodies shiver with cold and fear. "You're safe now," she murmured, wrapping them in her cloak. She could feel their tiny hearts racing against her chest. Even though she knew the forest could be dangerous, she could not leave them behind. Something deep inside told her that saving these creatures was important, more important than she could yet understand. As she carried the pups back toward the village, a sudden, chilling howl echoed through the forest. The sound was not like any wolf she had ever heard. It was deeper, resonant, and filled with authority and rage. The ground beneath her feet seemed to vibrate slightly, and the hair on her arms stood on end. The pups stiffened in her arms, growling softly, but their growls faded as the howl repeated, longer and more commanding this time. Ilara paused, her heart hammering. The forest seemed to hold its breath. She felt eyes on her, though she could see nothing beyond the fog and twisted trees. A sense of awe and fear washed over her, and yet, despite it, a strange curiosity pulled her forward. She continued toward the village, her pace quickened by a mix of adrenaline and worry for the pups. That night, after she had returned home and settled the pups near the hearth, Ilara dreamed of the howl again. In her dream, the forest stretched endlessly, shadows moving among the trees. From the darkness, a figure emerged, towering, with amber eyes that glowed like fire. The figure spoke in a voice that was both commanding and melodic, but the words were not human. And yet, she understood them in her heart. A thank you, a warning, and something else, an invitation she could not name. When she woke, the memory of the dream lingered like smoke in her mind. She glanced at the pups, now sleeping peacefully, and felt a strange sense of destiny pressing down on her. She did not know what awaited her, but she sensed that saving the pups had set something in motion, something far larger than herself. The next morning, as she stepped outside to feed the pups, the air was thick with fog. She gasped, freezing in place. At the edge of her small garden, 2 massive wolves stood, their fur dark and sleek, eyes glowing with an intelligence that made her chest tighten. They were far larger than ordinary wolves, almost the size of small horses, and their gaze was fixed entirely on her. Before she could react, the air seemed to shift, and a figure stepped from the shadows behind them. He was tall, broader than any man she had seen, with dark hair falling over his shoulders and eyes that mirrored the golden glow of the wolves. His presence was commanding, like a force of nature itself. And yet there was an unspoken weight of loneliness in him. "You've meddled with what you do not yet understand," he said, his voice deep and steady, vibrating through the morning mist. Ilara's voice caught in her throat. I saved the pups," They were trapped. I couldn't leave them to die. The man's gaze softened slightly, though it still carried power and authority. He stepped closer, and the wolves moved beside him, their massive forms a living shield. Compassion is rare. It is also dangerous. You have chosen to interfere with fate itself. Elara's heart raced. Fear mixed with awe as she took a cautious step forward. Who? Who are you? Who are you? I am Kale, he replied. Alpha King of this forest. Those pups you saved, they are my heirs. You have placed yourself in their fate, and now, in mine. Elara swallowed, trying to steady her shaking hands. The weight of his words sank in. She had only wanted to help. Yet somehow, she had entered a world far beyond her understanding. A world of power, magic, and ancient rules that humans were not meant to know. Kale's eyes softened, ever so slightly, as he studied her. You are brave. Perhaps foolishly so. Most would have fled at the howl last night. You did not. That is admirable. Elara could barely find her voice. I didn't mean to. I just couldn't leave them to die. Then you have courage, Kale said. And courage is a gift, as well as a burden. The forest will test you, human. And so will I. For a long moment, they stood silently. The pups nestled at Elara's feet, the fog curling around their forms like smoke. There was a tension in the air, heavy and electric, as though the forest itself waited to see what would happen next. Kale's gaze shifted toward the horizon, and the wind carried the sound of another howl, this one distant, colder, more threatening. Elara felt a chill run down her spine. The forest was alive in ways she had never imagined, and by saving the pups, she had stepped into its web of life, power, and danger. You do not yet understand the stakes, Kale said finally, turning his gaze back to her. But soon, you will. And when that time comes, you will need to choose, will you stand with them, or will you turn away? Junces within to do woe, and will need to choose will, and within to do them. Elara's heart pounded, but a strange calm settled over her. Despite the fear, despite the unknown, she knew she could not abandon the pups, or the mysterious king, who now stood before her. Something in her chest told her that saving these creatures had set her on a path she could not escape, and that her courage had awakened forces far greater than herself. The massive wolves shifted, their glowing eyes never leaving her face. Kale stepped closer, the ground seeming to respond to his presence, and the mist curled around him like living smoke. Rest now, he said. Tomorrow, you will learn what it means to protect those you love. And if you fail, the forest will not forgive you. Elara nodded, though her stomach twisted with fear and anticipation. She watched as Kale and the wolves vanished into the fog, leaving her alone with the pups. Yet she could not shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the forest itself had taken note of her courage, and that nothing would ever be the same again. As the sun began to rise, casting pale light across the misty trees, Elara whispered to the pups, "We'll face it together. Whatever comes, we'll be ready." And far in the depths of the forest, a low, resonant growl answered her words. A growl that was not angry, but expectant, like a promise and a warning all at once. The morning sun filtered through the dense forest, casting golden shafts of light on the dew-covered ground. Elara stood at the edge of a clearing, her hands gripping the pups tightly. Though she had grown used to their presence, the sheer power radiating from the wolves beside Kale made her heart beat faster. Kale's amber eyes watched her carefully. He stood tall, the air around him seeming charged with a quiet, commanding energy. The two massive wolves at his sides shifted slightly, their muscles taut, alert to every movement in the forest. "You have courage," Kale said, his voice low. carrying authority that made Elara straighten her back. But courage alone will not be enough. To protect those you love, you must understand this forest. And yourself. Elara nodded, though a knot of unease twisted in her stomach. What do you mean? Kale stepped forward, the mist swirling around his feet like a living thing. The forest tests all who enter it. It watches your heart. It senses weakness, doubt, fear, and it punishes those who are unprepared. Tomorrow, you will face your first trial. Only then will you see what it truly means to protect the pups and your own life. Elara's throat went dry. A trial? Alone? Kale shook his head. Not alone. You will not be without help, but neither will you be spared the danger. The forest will speak, and you must listen. The pups, they are more than mere creatures. They are heirs, and their future is tied to yours. The pups whimpered softly, nuzzling her hands. Their small faces reflected a trust and innocence that moved something deep inside her. I will do my best, she said firmly, more to convince herself than him. Kale studied her, and for a moment, the hard, commanding look in his eyes softened. Good. Courage without resolve is wasted. Resolve without heart is cruel. You must have both. That evening, Kale led Elara to a hidden part of the forest where the trees grew taller and denser, and the shadows stretched longer. The ground was carpeted with moss, and the air smelled of earth and ancient wood. The pups trailed behind, sensing the importance of this place. This is where your trial begins, Kale said. A beast of shadow haunts this forest. It is not ordinary, and it will test your heart, your will, and your courage. You must face it without hesitation and without fear for yourself. Only then can you protect what matters most. Elara swallowed hard. Her mind filled with images of the twisted trees and unseen dangers lurking among them. She had faced wild animals before, but never anything like this. And yet, she felt a strange calm settle in her chest. She could not run, not when the pups' lives depended on her, not when Kale had entrusted her with this task. The shadows in the forest shifted, moving as if alive. From the darkness emerged a large, wolf-like creature. Its fur black as night and eyes glowing red with hunger and anger. It snarled, a sound that shook the leaves on the trees, and stepped closer. Elara froze for a moment, fear clutching at her chest. But she remembered Kale's words, the weight of responsibility, and the trust in the pup's eyes. I won't let you harm them, she said, her voice trembling but steady. The creature lunged. Heart pounding, Elara dodged, remembering the way Kale had moved yesterday, his speed, his precision. She ran, weaving between trees, the shadows stretching and shifting around her. The creature followed, relentless, its red eyes never leaving her. Then, just as the creature leapt, the two massive wolves appeared, charging from the mist. Their roars echoed through the forest, and the shadow beast hesitated, snarling at the unexpected threat. Elara saw her chance. She grabbed a sturdy branch and swung it, striking the creature's side. It yelped and retreated, disappearing back into the darkness from which it had emerged. Breathless, her heart hammering, Elara sank to her knees. The pups ran to her, nuzzling her hands, their small bodies shivering. She looked up to see Kale standing silently, his eyes watching her every movement. You acted with courage, he said finally, his voice calm but firm. And with heart. That is why you survived. But remember, this is only the beginning. The forest will test you again. And next time, it may not be so forgiving. Elara nodded, determination burning in her chest. I understand. I will be ready. Over the next days, Kale guided her through the forest, teaching her to move silently, to sense the energy of the land, and to understand the wolves' language of movement and sound. Each lesson was a challenge, pushing her beyond her limits, forcing her to confront her fears and doubts. During this time, Elara noticed changes in Kael. Behind his commanding exterior, there were glimpses of something softer, moments where he seemed almost human, vulnerable. Once, when a sudden storm forced them to take shelter under a massive tree, he confided quietly, "I have ruled this forest for centuries. I have fought enemies, lost friends, and carried the weight of a crown heavier than any armor. Yet, I have never met one who faced fear with such honesty as you." Elara felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of admiration and something deeper she could not name. I'm just trying to do what is right," she replied. Kael's amber eyes met hers. Right is a path filled with pain and sacrifice. But sometimes, it is the only path worth walking. One night, under a silver moon, Kael led Elara to a hidden clearing where the forest seemed to hold its breath. The pups played near the edge, unaware of the danger lurking beyond. Kael motioned for her to kneel. "This is your final test," he said. "You must protect them, not with weapons, but with your heart. The forest will challenge you, and only by trusting your courage and your bond with the pups will you succeed." Elara nodded, kneeling as instructed. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. From the darkness, a figure emerged, not a beast this time, but a phantom-like apparition, shifting and twisting, its form almost human. It spoke without words, its presence pressing against her mind, forcing her to confront her deepest fears, failure, loss, and the thought that she could never truly protect those she loved. Her chest tightened, and tears sprang to her eyes. "No," she whispered. "I will not fail them. I will protect them. No." At that moment, the pups ran to her, pressing their small bodies against hers. Their trust, their innocence, their love for her gave her strength. She reached out with her hands, and the apparition froze, its dark form flickering like smoke. Elara's courage, her unwavering heart, pushed back the shadow. With a final, silent roar, the apparition dissipated, leaving only the still, quiet forest behind. Kael stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have passed," he said, his voice low, but filled with approval. "You have shown courage, compassion, and resolve. You have proven that you can protect those who cannot protect themselves. And in doing so, you have begun to awaken something in me that I thought long lost." Elara looked up at him, her heart racing. Kael's gaze softened, and for the first time, he allowed a small, almost human smile. "I have lived too long in shadow. I have ruled, fought, and endured alone. But seeing your courage, your heart, I realize that I am not truly alone, and perhaps, if fate allows, neither will you be." Before she could reply, a sudden howl tore through the forest. A howl unlike any they had heard before, colder and more menacing. The pup stiffened, and Kael's eyes narrowed, glowing with an intense amber light. "They come," he said, his voice tense. "And they are not alone." Elara's heart pounded as she realized that the forest was not yet done with her trials. Danger loomed closer, and she knew that the next challenge would test not just her courage, but her bond with Kael, and the strength of the trust she had built with the pups. The forest was alive with tension, each tree and shadow seeming to quiver as if aware of the approaching danger. Elara's heart thumped fiercely in her chest, and the pups pressed against her legs, their small bodies trembling. Across the clearing, Kael stood tall, his amber eyes glowing like molten gold. The massive wolves at his sides bristled with anticipation, ready to defend their king and the heirs of their lineage. From the mist, shapes began to emerge, figures dark and menacing, moving with unnatural silence. Rival hunters, armed with blades and traps, were followed by twisted creatures of the forest, beings of shadow and malice drawn by the scent of the pup's blood. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, reflecting hunger and intent. Kale's gaze swept over the gathering threat. "Stay close," he said to Elara, his voice low and steady. "Do not falter. They will test your courage, your trust, and your bond with the pups. Only together can we survive this." Elara nodded, gripping the pups to her chest. Fear knotted her stomach, but beneath it burned a fierce determination. She had come too far to turn away now. She could feel Kale's strength radiating toward her. And in that, she drew courage she did not know she possessed. The first hunter lunged, dagger glinting in the faint sunlight filtering through the trees. Kale moved like a shadow, faster than she could follow, his hand striking with precision that left no room for error. A wolf lunged, jaws snapping, and the hunter was thrown back into the mist with a startled cry. Elara felt her pulse race. She could not fight like Kale. She had no superhuman strength. But she realized that courage was not always measured in force. It was measured in heart, in the willingness to act when fear threatened to paralyze you. She stepped forward, placing herself between a small, advancing shadow creature and the pups. "Go!" she shouted, waving the pups behind her. The creature hissed and lunged at her, but she stood her ground, her voice steady. A sudden surge of energy seemed to pulse from her heart, a quiet power of protection and love. The creature recoiled, startled by the force in her presence, and vanished back into the mist. Kale's amber eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, there was an unspoken recognition. She was no longer merely a human who had stumbled into the forest. She was a protector, a force that could stand alongside him. The battle continued, each moment a test of courage and trust. Hunters and shadow creatures moved with cunning, but Kale and the wolves were unmatched in skill and power. Yet the forest itself seemed to rise in challenge, as if every tree and shadow were alive, pushing them toward their limits. At one point, a hunter tried to flank them, creeping through the underbrush with a knife aimed at one of the pups. Elara's heart leapt. Without thinking, she sprinted forward, grabbing a fallen branch and swinging it with all her strength. The hunter stumbled, giving Kale the opening he needed. In a swift movement, he disarmed the man, sending him sprawling into the ferns. The pups yipped and ran to her, pressing against her legs again. Their trust was a tangible thing, a bond that gave her strength she did not know she had. "We can do this," she whispered. "Together." Kale nodded, the corners of his eyes softening as he glanced at her. "Indeed. Together. Nothing can break the bond we share. Remember that." Suddenly, the largest shadow creature advanced, larger and more terrifying than the others, its form shifting like smoke and flame. It growled, a sound that vibrated through the forest, chilling the air. Kale stepped forward, his form radiating authority, and the wolves growled in unison, their roar shaking the very ground. "You will not touch them," Kale said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Not while I draw breath." Elara felt fear coil in her chest, but she did not step back. She glanced at the pups, their small faces looking up at her, with trust and innocence. She knew then that her courage was not for herself, it was for them, for Kale, and for all the lives that depended on her resolve. The shadow creature lunged, and Kale moved with supernatural speed, intercepting it mid-air. The two forces clashed, one of raw strength and magic, the other of darkness and malice. Sparks of light and shadow flew in all directions. Elara, holding the pups tightly, felt the forest hum with energy, as if recognizing the bond between human and wolf, between courage and love. Time seemed to stretch as the battle raged. Elara's limbs ached, and sweat and dirt smeared her face, but she did not falter. She felt the creatures around her hesitate, sensing the strength of her determination. With a cry, she raised her voice and her hands, a surge of protective energy spilling from her heart. A force shaped by love and bravery. The shadow creature froze, then slowly dissipated into the mist, leaving only silence in its wake. Kale lowered his arms, the forest still vibrating with the aftermath of their victory. He walked to her side, his amber eyes glowing softly with admiration. "You were extraordinary," he said, his voice almost tender. "Your courage and heart, they saved the pups. And more than that, they saved me." Ilara's chest heaved as she set the pups down, letting them run to Kale. The massive wolves circled, growling softly in acknowledgement, before returning to Kale's side. She felt a wave of relief and joy wash over her, mixed with something deeper, an unspoken bond forming between her and the Alpha King. "You have proven yourself," Kale said, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Not only to the forest, but to yourself. You see, now that courage, love, and trust are not weaknesses, they are the greatest strengths a heart can possess." Ilara looked up at him, her chest still racing. I never imagined I could do all this." Kale's gaze softened, almost human now, touched by vulnerability. "You were never meant to imagine. You were meant to act, to trust yourself, and to embrace the power within your heart. That is why the forest brought you here, and why the pups chose you." The pups yipped and nuzzled against her legs again, their innocence and trust a tangible reminder of the bond they all shared. She knelt, running her hands through their soft fur, feeling a profound connection not just to the pups, but to the forest, to Kale, and to the destiny that had drawn them together. As the sun began to rise, casting golden light over the forest, Kale stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet comforting. "There will be more challenges ahead," he said quietly. "The forest is alive, and it will continue to test those who dwell within it. But know this, whatever comes, you are no longer alone. We are bound. You, the pups, and I. Together, we are stronger than any darkness." Ilara looked into his amber eyes, seeing centuries of loneliness, strength, and the beginnings of hope reflected there. "Together," she echoed, her voice filled with conviction. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the forest around them calm yet alive, as if breathing with a new rhythm. The pups frolicked nearby, unaware of the trials they had survived but feeling the safety and strength of the bond that now surrounded them. Kale reached out, his hand brushing hers lightly, a gesture of trust and acknowledgement. "You have awakened something in me," he said, his voice soft. "Something I thought was lost forever. Perhaps it is love. Or perhaps it is the courage to finally hope again." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined that saving two small creatures could lead to this connection, this power, this feeling of destiny fulfilled. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of pride, relief, and something deeper that she could not yet name. As they watched the sun rise together, the forest around them sparkling with dew and magic, a distant howl echoed, not threatening this time, but solemn, almost like a herald of new beginnings. The pups yipped in excitement, running in circles, and Kale allowed himself a small smile. Ilara realized then that the forest had given her more than a trial, more than a challenge. It had given her purpose, a bond, and a chance to be part of something far greater than herself. And Kale had shown her that courage and love could transform even the darkest, loneliest hearts. The forest remained alive, whispering secrets in the wind, but Ilara no longer feared it. With Kale by her side, the pups safe and playful, she felt ready for whatever the future held. She had saved lives, faced shadows, and in doing so, had awakened something powerful, not just in the forest, but in herself, and in the Alpha King who had once walked alone. And so, under the rising sun, With mist curling around them like a living cloak, the legend of Ilara, the Alpha King, and the wolf pups began a story of courage, trust, and the enduring power of love that could defy fear, darkness, and time itself.